Megan Hicks of I Run Far. I'm here with Keely Henninger for our debut Catching Up With interview series. I'm in Moab, Utah. You are in Bend, Oregon?
I'm in Bend. Yep, Bend, Oregon.
Awesome. And last weekend, you won the Peterson Ridge Rumble, which is, I think, like your post-pandemic debut run.
Yeah, I think it was the first race in like over a year and a half, which is just crazy. So it was really good to actually like think about racing again and get into that mindset and actually have to test yourself like both physically and mentally.
I want to ask you about that race, but some stuff has happened since the last time I Run Far interviewed you. Was your last race North Face like late 2019? Did you race at all as the pandemic was getting going?
Nope, North Face 2019 was my last race up until Peterson.
Okay. And so what was the pandemic world like for you?
I mean, I feel like it was really tough. And I mean, I don't think I'm alone in saying that, but yeah, I mean, the first like 3 or 4 months, I feel like it was all over the place. You were just up and down all over the place. Like I would go from not wanting to train at all to like completely overtraining and then like kind of breaking myself to then like trying to find this balance of like what makes me happy and then what is beneficial for training and like how can you train through this new world. And so it just took some adapting, I think, and a lot more learning that I thought I'd already done enough of. But I think it ended up being a blessing again, like being able to sit with your thoughts and really just like train because you want to, because you don't have any races was kind of fun.
I feel like that's going to be one of those hindsight is 2020 conversation pieces of running post pandemic is just us really having that perspective of why, the very intrinsic why.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really lets you boil down like why you're racing and why you do it, and not like doesn't let you get caught up in all of the external gratification because there's actually none. And so if you're not doing it for the right reasons, it ends up being like super ungratifying because you're not doing it for the right reasons. There's nobody to gratify you, and then you're not gratified. So it's just like this whirlwind of like just like not a sustainable training pattern. And so I think the pandemic like lets you recenter on why you run and like really figure out what like suits you the best without all of these external accolades or races to really like test your fitness.
Everybody's worlds in the pandemic were different. Almost everybody was work from home unless you're an essential worker. I think you had some unique time. You were able to go to a new geography during the pandemic?
Yeah, I think I got really lucky with my job at Nike. It turned remote, but because I work with research subjects, it wasn't fully remote. So I still would have to go back about every month to collect data and like work with subjects. But yeah, it let me work from Park City for like 4 months, which I fell in love with. And I'm just trying to figure out ways to get back there. And then kind of went back to Portland for a little bit. And now I'm in Bend and have been here kind of going back and forth for a couple of months as well. And it's just been fun to be able to explore different areas and like just see the things you really like about places, as well as the things you maybe don't want to do or like to live in.
Park City is pretty cool. Brian and I lived there for a couple of years, and it was remarkable, like the trail access backyard, like literally you can get on a trail moments from wherever you live in that town.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was next level. And then pair that with like the mountain biking is amazing. Like little town is so walkable that you feel like you're in just this little like mountain training mecca, and you don't really have to go anywhere else because you can get to like 10,000 feet out your door and be in the middle of the Wasatch, and it's just so cool.
So when Brian and I lived there, it was about a decade ago, and hashtags were like just becoming a thing on social media, and people would say in Park City, hashtag everyone's an Olympian, which is like literally true.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I mean that's how I found out about the place. Is I'd gone to Park City with Bowerman and my friend Colleen, who was their PT. And that's kind of the first time I'd been there, and I just left being like, I need to come back here. That was amazing. And then a month later, I moved there for like 4 months. So
That's amazing. So your name is on the entry list for Western States. You have to correct me because you've been, if I'm wrong, you've been around the sport for so long, I kind of forget. Is this your first 100 miler?
yes.
Okay, so let's talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, so back in 2018, I won Sonoma and ended up deferring my ticket, like not taking the ticket to Western. At that point, I'd only been in the sport for like 3 years, with like a year or two of that being like completely unaware of how to train. And so I just felt like my body wasn't really ready for that 100-mile distance yet. And Western's just such a magical race that I don't want to go in it like not there for the right reasons and not feeling physically ready. So yeah, I decided not to do it then. And so now, basically pre-pandemic, 2020, I was slated to run it, and I was actually like really excited for it. And then obviously that didn't happen. So it got deferred to this year. And so, yeah, I think we lost a year where we couldn't really do any more racing. And so now, yeah, it's like I got this other year under my like running belt, even though it was no racing, right? But now it feels like I've been running a pretty long time. And I'm just really excited to try that race. I mean, the race itself is just like the most contagious community is around it. And so every time I've gone, it's just been so fun. And then I just think, me personally, like I really love the California type terrain and the runnable trails. And so I just think the course itself will suit me really well as also. And so I'm just super excited for like the challenge and the opportunity and like seeing all my friends.
You've done a couple pretty long races, like the bridging the gap from, say, CCC to Western States is like not a huge amount of time wise. Like, what? Yeah, it's so interesting to think about. Like, you're going to do your first 100 miler, but we've had a gap in racing time. But you have all this experience with, sort of like that 50-mile type distance. Where's your mindset in terms of like, yeah, 100 miles?
Well, going into Peterson this last weekend, I thought 36 miles felt long. So 100 feels super long. And I think a couple of years off of racing is probably going to work to my advantage and disadvantage. The advantage being my runner amnesia is even stronger. I don't remember how horrible I felt at the end of Lavaredo, 120K or after 100Ks. So that's going to be to my advantage. But I think, and then another thing to my advantage is I think over the year, I've just become way more humbled by the sport and way more appreciative of the distance and the challenge. And so I think going into the race, like I'm just going to like, I'm not going to force it, and I'm going to kind of just like pay homage to the race and really respect the distance, instead of trying to like, try to crush 100 miles without really knowing what that even entails. And then I think the disadvantage is just like remembering how to like fuel for that long of an endeavor, and like remembering what it feels like to be running on legs after 6 or 7 hours and trying to push to 18, 19 hours. Like that'll just be interesting. I do recall the Lavaredo felt miserable at the end, and that was only 15 hours, so we'll see.
Thanks for reminding me and everybody else about Lavaredo too, because that's a real long sub 100-mile
yeah
race.
That's a beast.
You said before we started with this interview that you were planning to go back to Park City, hoping to do some Western States training there. It's a bit higher altitude than what you have at home, and also drier, hotter, dustier trails, like more Sierra Nevada like in my mind.
Yeah, the goal would be to hopefully get 6 to 8 weeks of training in Park City before Western. So hoping to figure out a way to get there relatively soon. And yeah, I just think it mimics Western States trails pretty well. Like you're getting way more altitude than any place that I can be in Oregon. And then all the trails are pretty runnable, as we talked before as well. Like there's not a ton of hiking trails. It's more like you got to run all the way up to the peak, which is pretty indicative of Western. A lot of the Western trails are like you're kind of running, even though it's 100 miles. Like they're faster trails.
Um, I have to ask this, like, there's a lot of Pacific Northwest women who've really ripped it up at Western States. And for me, like Pacific Northwest, I think of like cooler, more humid, definitely lower altitude. What is like, what's the secret sauce for the Pacific Northwest women in Western?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think for me, like the gorge and everything surrounding Portland, Oregon, you get a lot of climbing and it's all runnable.
Mm.
And so you're just constantly getting a ton of climbing, having to run it, having to run the downhills really hard. Like it's pretty fast. And so I think it just bodes well for like conditioning the quads for all the downhill pounding at Western, and then conditioning your aerobic capacity for the uphills. And so while some areas of the states are really good for like hiking and learning to like power hike for UTMB and all that stuff, I think the Pacific Northwest is really good for like just running really long days in the mountains. And then we also, like, especially in Portland, we don't really have to stop running during the winter. And so I think we do get a little bit of a leg up in terms of starting our training earlier because we don't get snow. And so you can kind of always be running pretty serious runs, like starting as early as you want.
I think that's a really good point about early season running. Also, like it seems like people
Mm-hmm.
who come from wet climates are just hardier humans. Like they don't feel pain or hardship as much as us dry climate folks.
Yeah, well, that's a very funny point because I think I've gotten soft since moving to like different drier climates. Now
Oh,
it'll
there's
be
a
raining in
cloud.
Portland, and I'm like, no, I don't want to go running in this.
That's really funny. Well, this is my first interview like this in over a year. So thanks for making this so enjoyable. I look forward to watching on your social media your training lead up to Western States. And at this point, Western States is looking like I Run Far's first live coverage in, yeah, it'll be like 16 months. So we are
Oh, that's so
about as
cool.
stoked as you can be about doing live race coverage. So we'll look forward to chasing you around the Sierra Nevada in a couple months.
Yeah, I look forward to it. I can't wait to see you guys back out there on a course. It'll feel kind of normal.
Yeah, there'll be some weird masks and some awkward, like extra distance when we're doing our interviews in person, but it is what it is, right?
Exactly.
Thanks, Keely. Thank you so
Yeah, no
much.
problem.